You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove your worth to be valuable. The most respected people in the world say the least, and yet their presence says everything. They walk into a room and shift the air without saying a word. That's not luck. That's mastery. People don't follow noise, they follow certainty, and certainty is silent. In this message, I'll teach you how to develop a presence that commands respect before you ever speak. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Picture this. You walk into a room filled with strangers. No one knows your name. No one knows your accomplishments. You haven't spoken a single word, and yet something happens. People notice. Conversations pause. Attention shifts. Eyes track. Your movement. What just happened? You've experienced the invisible power of presence. The unspoken language that communicates more than words ever could. I've spent decades studying human behavior, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Presence speaks louder than words. It always has. It always will. But here's what most people don't understand. Presence isn't something you're born with. It's something you cultivate. It's something you master. And today, I'm going to show you how. Think about the people you respect most in your life. The leaders, the mentors, the individuals who command attention without demanding it. What do they all have in common? They possess a quality that transcends speech. They communicate their value through their very being. This isn't mystical. This is practical psychology. Your presence is composed of subtle signals, your posture, your composure, your energy. These elements work together to create an impression far more powerful than anything you could articulate before you ever open. Your mouth, people have already formed judgments about your confidence, your competence, your status. I remember watching President Roosevelt enter a crowded room during a particularly tense diplomatic gathering. The man hadn't spoken a word, but his presence, his upright posture, deliberate pace, and unwavering gaze immediately commanded respect from everyone present. Foreign dignitaries who moments before had been engaged in heated debates suddenly fell silent. Their attention was absolute. Roosevelt understood what I'm teaching you now. Respect begins in silence. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room rarely commands the most respect? There's a reason for this. Excessive talking often betrays insecurity. It signals a desperate need for validation. True power doesn't need to announce itself. True power is self-evident. I've coached thousands of business leaders and public figures over the years. The most common mistake I see is this belief that respect must be earned through words, through convincing, explaining, justifying. This approach almost always backfires. Here's why. When you overly explain yourself, you subtly communicate that you need others' approval. You position yourself as someone seeking validation, rather than someone who inherently deserves respect. Consider the difference between these two approaches. The first person enters a meeting and immediately begins listing their credentials, explaining their expertise, asserting their authority through words. The second person enters with calm confidence, takes their time, makes deliberate eye contact, and sits with perfect posture, shoulders back, spine straight, completely at ease in their own skin. Who commands more respect? The answer is obvious. But how do you develop this kind of presence? It begins with self-awareness. Most people move through life completely unconscious of how they're being perceived. They're unaware of their physical presence, how they stand, how they move, how they occupy space. They don't realize that their body is constantly broadcasting messages about their inner state. The first step toward commanding respect without words is becoming conscious of these signals. Stand in front of a mirror. What do you see? Are your shoulders hunched or squared? Is your gaze direct or evasive? Do you fidget or are you still? These subtle physical traits speak volumes about your self-perception. And here's the crucial insight. How you perceive yourself is how others will perceive you. If you carry yourself like someone worthy of respect, people will treat you accordingly. If you carry yourself like someone insignificant, that's exactly how you'll be treated. This isn't superficial advice about faking it until you make it. This is about alignment, bringing your outer presence into harmony with your inner worth. Because you are worthy of respect, you simply need to embody that truth. I worked with a brilliant young attorney who couldn't understand why clients and colleagues didn't take her seriously, despite her exceptional knowledge and skill. When I observed her in professional settings, the problem became immediately clear. Her physical presence undermined her expertise. She would shrink in her chair during meetings. She would speak quickly, as if apologizing for taking up time. She would nod excessively when others spoke. These subtle behaviors communicated insecurity, regardless of her intellectual brilliance. We worked on her presence, teaching her to take up space unapologetically, to move with deliberate purpose, to maintain composed stillness when not speaking. Within weeks, the shift in how others responded to her was remarkable. Nothing about her knowledge had changed, only her presence. Your presence is your silent ambassador. It speaks on your behalf. When words haven't yet entered the conversation, it determines whether people lean in or tune out. It establishes your place in the social hierarchy before a single word is exchanged. In the chapters to come, we'll break down each element of commanding presence, from the science of first impressions to the subtle art of non-reactivity. You'll learn exactly how to cultivate a presence that demands respect without saying a word. Remember this: in a world drowning in noise, silence paired with powerful presence is the ultimate differentiator. Master this, and you'll never again need to convince people of your worth. They'll feel it the moment you enter the room. People decide who you are in the first few seconds of meeting you. This isn't an opinion, it's scientific fact. Researchers at Princeton University discovered that it takes just 1/10 of a second for someone to form judgments about your character. 1/10 of a second, before you've even spoken a word. But here's what fascinates me most. These snappy judgments aren't random. They're remarkably consistent across different observers, and they're remarkably difficult to change once established. What does this mean for you? It means that the impression you make in those first crucial moments isn't based on what you say. It's based on what people feel when they see you. Your presence speaks first. Your words come second. Let me tell you about an experiment that changed how I understand human interaction. Researchers showed participants brief, silent video clips, just a few seconds, of teachers they had never met. Based on these silent clips alone, the participants rated the teacher's effectiveness. When these ratings were compared with evaluations from students who had studied with these teachers for an entire semester, the results were nearly identical. Think about the implications. People who watched just seconds of silent footage formed the same impressions as people who spent months with these individuals. This tells us something profound. Our micro-behaviors, the subtle, often unconscious elements of our presence, speak volumes about who we are. But here's what most people don't understand about first impressions. They're not primarily intellectual judgments, they're emotional responses. When someone meets you, they're not logically assessing your qualities, they're feeling your impact. The human brain evolved to make rapid assessments of others. Is this person a threat or an ally? Are they competent or incompetent? Confident or insecure? These determinations happen at a neurological level far below conscious thought. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for signals of status, power, and reliability. It's using an ancient operating system designed to help our ancestors quickly determine who to trust, who to follow, who to avoid. When you walk into a room, people's brains are asking silent questions. Does this person have high status? Are they a leader? Can they be trusted? Should I listen to them? And here's the crucial insight. Your micro-behaviors are answering these questions before you speak. How you walk through a door, how long you maintain eye contact, the steadiness of your gaze, the subtle tension or relaxation in your facial muscles, the way you occupy space, the pace of your movements, the stillness or fidgeting of your hands. Each of these signals is feeding into an unconscious evaluation of your worth. I once consulted for a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why his team seemed reluctant to follow his direction despite his exceptional expertise. When I observed him in meetings, the issue became immediately clear. His entrance was tentative. He would pause at the doorway, shuffle in with quick, nervous steps, and take his seat with minimal eye contact. These micro-behaviors were sending signals of insecurity and low status that undermined his intellectual authority. His words carried expertise, but his presence communicated doubt. We worked intensively on transforming these first impression signals. He learned to pause deliberately before entering a room, to walk with measured, confident steps, to make sustained, comfortable eye contact with each person present, to sit with relaxed alertness rather than tense anxiety. Within weeks, the response from his team transformed. Nothing about his knowledge had changed, only the subtle signals of his presence. Here's what's remarkable. When we changed his physical behaviors, his internal experience changed as well. By adopting the micro-behaviors of confidence, he began to genuinely feel more confident. The outer change led to an inner transformation. This is the power of embodiment. Your physical presence doesn't just reflect your internal state, it can actually create it. But let's get practical. What specific microbehaviors create a powerful first impression? Here are the critical elements. Your entrance, never rush. Move with deliberate purpose. Pause slightly at thresholds. This signals self-assurance and command of your environment. Your walk. Maintain a pace that is neither hurried nor sluggish. Your stride should be measured and intentional. This communicates confidence and control. Your posture. Stand fully upright, with your shoulders back and spine aligned. Imagine a string pulling you up from the crown of your head. This projects dignity and self-respect. Your eye contact. Meet the gaze of others directly, without staring or darting away. Hold eye contact slightly longer than feels comfortable. This demonstrates confidence and trustworthiness. Your facial expression. Cultivate what I call relaxed alertness, neither a forced smile nor a stern countenance, but an engaged, attentive expression that shows both confidence and approachability. Your gestures. Keep hand movements deliberate and purposeful. Avoid fidgeting, which signals nervousness and undermines authority. Your space occupation. Take up appropriate space without apology. Don't compress yourself to seem smaller or less intrusive. Your physical presence deserves room. Remember this, first impressions aren't just important, they're decisive. They set the trajectory for all future interactions. A powerful initial impression creates a foundation of respect that makes everything else possible. In our next chapter, we'll explore the cornerstone of commanding presence, silent confidence. Because true confidence doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. Here's what most people don't understand. You don't need to speak to shape perception. You're already speaking volumes through your presence. Make sure you're saying what you intend. Confidence isn't noise. It's calm. It's certainty. It's knowing who you are without needing to convince anyone. I want you to think about the most genuinely confident person you've ever met. Not someone who was arrogant or boastful, but someone who possessed true, unshakable self-assurance. How did they carry themselves? How did they speak? How did they respond to challenges? I can tell you what you didn't see. You didn't see them constantly seeking validation. You didn't see them dominating conversations to prove their worth. You didn't see them becoming defensive when questioned. True confidence is silent. It doesn't need to announce itself because it's self-evident. But here's what most people don't understand. This kind of confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. And it begins with a fundamental shift in how you view yourself and your place in the world. Most people operate from a place of external validation. Their sense of worth depends on others' approval. They need constant reinforcement to feel secure. They're always asking, implicitly or explicitly, "Am I good enough? Am I respected? Am I valued?" This mindset is a trap. It places your worth in others' hands. It makes you dependent on validation that can be given or withheld at someone else's whim. Silent confidence comes from a different place entirely. It springs from internal validation, from a deep, unshakable knowledge of your own value that doesn't require outside confirmation. When you operate from this foundation, everything changes. Your need to prove yourself disappears. Your anxiety about others' judgments fades. You become liberated from the exhausting cycle of seeking approval. I worked with a young entrepreneur who had built an impressive company, but constantly felt the need to remind everyone of his achievements. In meetings, he would find ways to mention his company's growth, his educational credentials, his industry connections. While impressive on paper, this behavior undermined his authority. It communicated insecurity rather than confidence. It suggested he didn't believe his worth. It was self-evident that he needed to convince others of his value. Our work together focused on building genuine internal validation. We started with a simple but powerful exercise, identifying his intrinsic worth separate from his achievements. This isn't easy in a culture that conflates accomplishment with value, but it's essential for developing silent confidence. Your worth as a human being isn't determined by your resume. It exists independent of external markers of success. Once you truly believe this, once you internalize the knowledge that you are inherently valuable, your need to constantly prove yourself dissolves. You can enter rooms without feeling the pressure to establish your credentials. You can listen without feeling the need to demonstrate your knowledge. You can simply be present, secure in who you are. But let me ask you this. How do you build this kind of internal validation when you've spent years, perhaps decades, seeking approval from others? It begins with awareness. Notice when you're seeking external validation. Catch yourself when you feel the urge to mention your achievements, to correct others, to dominate conversations. These moments of self-awareness create the space for change. Then, practice self-affirmation that isn't tied to accomplishment. Acknowledge your intrinsic qualities, your character, your values, your humanity. Recognize that these elements constitute your core worth, not your achievements or others' opinions. Next, adopt the physical posture of confidence, even when you don't feel it. Stand tall. Move deliberately. Maintain eye contact. Make your movements smooth and unhurried. Speak at a measured pace. These physical adjustments actually trigger psychological changes. Your body shapes your mind as much as your mind shapes your body. I remember working with a senior executive who had risen through the ranks on technical expertise but struggled with imposter syndrome in leadership meetings. Despite her brilliant mind, she would physically shrink in her chair when challenged, speak too quickly when presenting, and avoid eye contact during difficult conversations. We focused intensively on physical embodiment of confidence, teaching her to maintain an upright posture, to speak at a deliberate pace, to use purposeful gestures, to sustain comfortable eye contact. Within weeks, not only did others respond to her differently, but she began to genuinely feel more confident. This is the fascinating intersection of psychology and physiology. Adopting the external behaviors of confidence actually cultivates the internal experience of confidence. But the deepest work in building silent confidence involves confronting and releasing your core fears. Most validation-seeking behavior is driven by underlying fears: fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of being exposed as a fraud. These fears must be acknowledged, examined, and gradually released. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about honest self-reflection and psychological growth. Ask yourself, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped trying to prove my worth? What's the worst outcome I can imagine? Then, look that fear directly in the face. Examine it closely. Is it rational? Is it likely? Could I survive it if it happened? This process of fear examination diminishes its power. When you confront your deepest insecurities directly, they begin to lose their grip on you. I've guided thousands of people through this process, and I've seen remarkable transformations. People who once entered rooms with anxiety and self-doubt now walk in with quiet, unshakable confidence, not because they've achieved more or gained new credentials, but because they've developed a new relationship with themselves. This inner shift creates a profound outer change. When you no longer need others' approval to feel secure, you paradoxically become more likely to earn their respect. People are drawn to those who possess this quality of self-contained confidence. It signals leadership, reliability, and personal power. Remember this: respect cannot be demanded. It can only be commanded. And silent confidence is the foundation upon which commanding presence is built. In our next chapter, we'll explore a critical component of silent confidence: non-reactivity. Because in a world that's constantly trying to provoke reaction, the ability to remain steady and composed is perhaps the most powerful signal of inner strength you can display. When everyone else reacts, you hold your ground. That's power. That's control. Mastering non-reactivity is how you show the world you can't be shaken. Consider this scenario. You're in a high-stakes meeting. Someone directly challenges your idea, perhaps with a tone of dismissal or contempt. The room falls, silent. All eyes turn to you. What happens in your body at that moment? Most people experience an immediate physiological response. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense, thoughts race. The primitive brain activates its defense mechanisms. This is reactivity, the automatic unconscious response to perceived threats. And while it served our ancestors well when facing physical dangers, it undermines our effectiveness in modern social situations. Here's what most people don't understand. Your reaction in moments of challenge reveals more about your inner strength than any words you could speak. When you react with defensiveness, anger, or anxiety, you signal weakness. You communicate that others have the power to destabilize you. But when you remain non-reactive, calm, centered, and composed under pressure, you demonstrate remarkable inner strength. You show that your emotional state is self-determined, not controlled by external forces. I witnessed a perfect example of this during a board meeting for a major corporation. The CEO was presenting a controversial strategic pivot when a board member interrupted with a cutting remark. "This plan shows a fundamental misunderstanding of our industry. I'm concerned about your grasp of basic business principles." The room froze. Everyone turned to the CEO expecting a defensive response. Instead, he paused. He took a slow, deliberate breath. His posture remained upright and open. His facial expression didn't change. After a moment of perfect stillness, he responded in a measured tone, "I appreciate your concern. Would you elaborate on the specific aspects you find problematic?" In that moment of non-reactivity, he commanded more respect than any forceful defense could have achieved. He demonstrated that his emotional stability couldn't be disrupted by criticism. However, harsh non-reactivity is particularly powerful because it's so rare. Most people are slaves to their immediate emotional responses. They can't help but react when provoked, challenged, or criticized. When you develop the ability to remain steady in these moments, you immediately distinguish yourself as someone of uncommon self-mastery. But how do you develop this capacity? It begins with understanding the mechanics of reactivity. Your reactive responses follow a predictable pattern: trigger, emotion, behavior. Someone says or does something, trigger, you feel a certain way, emotion, and you act based on that feeling, behavior. Most people focus on changing their behavior, trying to act calm despite feeling rattled. This approach rarely works because it doesn't address the root of reactivity. True non-reactivity isn't about suppressing your natural responses. It's about transforming your relationship to triggers and emotions. First, develop awareness of your triggers, the specific situations words, or behaviors that consistently provoke emotional reactions in you. These triggers are often connected to core vulnerabilities or past experiences. By identifying them, you gain the power to anticipate and prepare for challenging moments. Next, create space between trigger and response. When you feel yourself becoming reactive, pause. Take a deliberate breath. This tiny interval disrupts the automatic trigger emotion behavior cycle and gives you a moment of choice. During this pause, observe your emotional response without judgment. Notice the physical sensations, the thoughts that arise, the urge to react in habitual ways. This observational stance creates distance between you and your reactions. You're no longer identified with them. You're witnessing them. This practice, often called mindful awareness, is transformative. With consistent application, you'll find that emotional triggers lose their power over you. You still feel the initial response, but it no longer controls your behavior. I worked with a brilliant attorney who struggled with reactivity during cross-examinations. When opposing counsel would make provocative statements, he would immediately become defensive, interrupting and arguing in ways that undermined his effectiveness. We developed a specific practice protocol. During simulated cross-examinations, he would focus on his breathing whenever he felt triggered. He would silently count to 3 before responding. He would maintain awareness of his physical posture, keeping it open and relaxed, rather than contracted and defensive. These simple practices, applied consistently, transformed his courtroom presence. He became known for his unflappable composure, a quality that not only enhanced his professional effectiveness, but also commanded deep respect from colleagues, judges, and even opponents. Remember this: non-reactivity isn't passive, it isn't weakness. It's a deliberate choice to respond from a place of centered strength rather than unconscious reactivity. In moments of conflict or challenge, the person who maintains composure holds the power. While others are hijacked by their emotions, you remain in command of your faculties. Your thinking stays clear, your perspective remains broad. Your response emerges from choice rather than compulsion. There is another dimension to non-reactivity that's equally important: its effect on others. When you remain calm in the face of emotional triggers, you create a powerful contrast. The more reactive someone else becomes, the more your composure stands out. This dynamic often leads to a fascinating psychological effect. People become uncomfortable with their own reactivity when faced with your steadiness. Your non-reactivity serves as a mirror reflecting their lack of self-control. I've seen this phenomenon countless times in negotiations, conflicts, and high-stakes discussions. The non-reactive person inevitably gains the psychological upper hand. Their composure becomes a form of gentle strength that often leads others to modulate their own behavior. Non-reactivity also creates a foundation for genuine listening. When you're not busy formulating defenses or counterattacks, you can truly hear what others are saying. This capacity for deep listening is itself a powerful form of respect-commanding presence. People can sense when you're fully present with them, when you're listening to understand rather than listening to respond. This quality is vanishingly rare, and it immediately distinguishes you as someone of unusual depth and maturity. Cultivate this ability to stay present even when challenged. Practice maintaining eye contact, keeping your breathing steady, and listening without internal commentary when someone is expressing views that trigger you. Over time, you'll develop what I call challenge comfort, the ability to remain at ease even when your ideas, decisions, or character are questioned. This comfort with challenge is a hallmark of true leadership presence. In our next chapter, we'll explore another critical element of commanding presence: the strategic use of eye contact. Because your eyes communicate your confidence, attention, and intentions more powerfully than words ever could. You can say more with one look than with 1,000 words. The way you use your eyes determines how people treat you. Throughout human history, across every culture, Direct eye contact has been a universal signal of confidence, honesty, and personal power. Your eyes are not just sensory organs, they're communication tools of remarkable precision and impact. But here's what most people don't understand. Eye contact isn't simply about looking at someone while they speak. It's an art form with subtle variations that communicate dramatically different messages. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in the presence of someone whose gaze seemed to look straight through you? Someone whose eye contact made you feel simultaneously seen and slightly unsettled? This quality of gaze, confident, unwavering, and penetrating, is one of the most powerful tools for commanding respect without words. I once witnessed a master negotiator use eye contact to completely transform the dynamics of a contentious business deal. While his counterpart across the table spoke with increasing aggression, the negotiator maintained calm, steady eye contact. He didn't glare or stare. He simply held a gaze of relaxed attention. As the minutes passed, the aggressive party began to falter. His speech slowed, his tone moderated. Eventually, he fell silent. Later, when asked what happened, he said, "I felt like he could see right through my tactics, like he knew something I didn't." This is the power of deliberate eye contact. It creates the perception of inner knowledge, of quiet certainty that needs no verbal expression. But mastering this art requires understanding several key principles. First, duration matters tremendously. Most people break eye contact too quickly, especially in challenging situations. This rapid eye movement signals discomfort, uncertainty, or submission. To command respect, you must learn to extend your eye contact slightly beyond what feels natural. Practice this. In your next conversation, hold eye contact for 1 second longer than your instinct tells you to. Notice what happens internally. You'll likely feel a moment of discomfort, a subtle urge to look away. This discomfort is the boundary between ordinary and commanding presence. When you push through this discomfort, maintaining calm, confident eye contact, you communicate remarkable self-assurance. You signal that you're comfortable in moments that make others uneasy. This quality immediately distinguishes you as someone of unusual personal power. Second, quality transcends quantity. Staring isn't the goal. The most commanding eye contact combines steadiness with comfort. It feels deliberate but not forced, confident but not aggressive, attentive but not invasive. To develop this quality, practice what I call relaxed focus. Imagine your gaze as a soft spotlight rather than a laser beam. You're not trying to stare the other person down. You're demonstrating comfortable attentiveness. Third, eye contact should be dynamic. It naturally flows between connection and breaks. When speaking to groups, you distribute your gaze strategically, making individual connections throughout the room rather than scanning generically. I worked with a brilliant executive who struggled to command attention during presentations, despite her exceptional expertise. When I observed her speaking to groups, I noticed she would either stare at her notes or scan the room without making genuine connection. We developed a specific technique, the lighthouse method. She would mentally divide the room into sections and deliberately make eye contact with one person in each section, holding that connection for a complete thought before moving to another area. This simple adjustment transformed her presence. Audience members reported feeling personally connected to her message, even in large gatherings. Fourth, context determines appropriateness. The eye contact that commands respect in a business negotiation differs from what works in a mentoring session or social gathering. Develop range and adaptability in your gaze. In confrontational settings, steady, unwavering eye contact communicates boundary strength and self-assurance. In collaborative environments, a warmer, more inclusive gaze builds connection while maintaining authority. Learn to modulate between these modes depending on your objectives. Fifth, cultural awareness matters. While direct eye contact is generally associated with confidence across cultures, its specific applications vary significantly. In some Asian cultures, prolonged direct eye contact with superiors may be perceived as challenging authority. In certain Middle Eastern contexts, eye contact between genders carries different implications than in Western settings. Develop cultural intelligence about eye contact norms in the environments where you operate. The goal isn't to abandon your authentic presence, but to adapt it appropriately to different contexts. Sixth, and perhaps most importantly, authentic eye contact must come from a place of genuine presence. People can sense when your eyes are connected to your attention and when they're not. You've likely experienced the disconnection of speaking with someone whose eyes are on you, but whose attention is clearly elsewhere. This misalignment between eyes and attention undermines trust. It creates the subtle impression that you're performing presence rather than embodying it. To truly command respect through eye contact, your eyes must be the honest expression of your focused attention. Practice full presence in your conversations. When someone is speaking, give them your complete attention, not just your eyes, but your mind and awareness as well. This alignment creates a quality of gaze that people respond to at a deep, often unconscious level. I remember working with a political candidate who was struggling to connect with voters despite polling well on policy positions. When we analyzed videos of his interactions, the issue became clear. While he maintained technical eye contact with people, his gaze had a distant quality that communicated disengagement. We focused on developing what I call connected seeing, the practice of not just looking at people, but truly seeing them. This subtle shift transformed his presence in public settings. Voters began describing him as authentic and truly present, without being able to identify exactly what had changed. The power of authentic eye contact extends beyond formal or professional settings. In any human interaction, your gaze communicates your level of confidence, interest, and personal power. Notice how often people break eye contact when making important points, especially when stating their needs or expressing disagreement. This unconscious eye movement undermines their message, suggesting doubt or discomfort with their own position. Practice maintaining steady eye contact precisely when making your most significant points. This alignment of gaze with content dramatically increases your impact and perceived authority. Remember this: your eyes reveal your relationship with yourself. If you're uncomfortable with your own thoughts, beliefs, or requests, this discomfort will manifest in your gaze. Developing commanding eye contact isn't just about external technique. It's about cultivating internal congruence between what you're saying and what you truly believe. In our next chapter, we'll explore another fundamental element of commanding presence, the posture of authority. Because how you physically occupy space communicates volumes about how you occupy your place in the world. Your shoulders, your spine, your stance, these are the silent signals of strength. The way you physically position yourself in space speaks volumes about how you position yourself in life. Think about the people you instinctively respect, the natural leaders, the commanding presences. How do they stand? How do they sit? How do they move through space? There's a physical grammar to authority that transcends culture, context, and circumstance. But here's what most people don't understand. Powerful posture isn't about rigidity or tension. It's about alignment, balance, and deliberate presence. It's the physical embodiment of inner certainty. I have spent decades studying the subtle mechanics of influential presence, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, your body shapes your psychology as much as your psychology shapes your body. The relationship is bidirectional. When you adopt the posture of authority, you begin to feel more authoritative. When you feel more authoritative, your posture naturally reflects this inner state. This insight isn't just philosophical speculation, it's backed by rigorous scientific research. Harvard psychologist Amy Cuddy's groundbreaking studies demonstrated that adopting power poses for just 2 minutes significantly increases testosterone, the dominance hormone, and decreases cortisol, the stress hormone. Think about the implications. By deliberately adjusting your physical posture, you can actually alter your biochemistry in ways that enhance your sense of confidence and diminish your experience of stress. This internal shift then reinforces your external presence, creating a positive feedback loop of increased authority. Let's break down the specific elements of authoritative posture. First, spinal alignment forms the literal backbone of commanding presence. When your spine is properly aligned, straight but not rigid, elongated but not strained, you immediately project dignity and self-respect. Imagine a string pulling you upward from the crown of your head, lengthening your spine and creating space between each vertebra. I worked with a brilliant young executive who couldn't understand why her team seemed reluctant to follow her direction despite her exceptional expertise. When I observed her in meetings, the issue became immediately clear. Her habitual posture, shoulders rounded forward, spine collapsed, head jutting forward, undermined her authority before she spoke a single word. We focused intensively on spinal alignment, teaching her to sit and stand with her spine in its natural, elongated position. Within weeks, the response from her team transformed dramatically. Nothing about her knowledge or leadership style had changed, only her physical presence. Second, shoulder position communicates volumes about your confidence and personal power. Rounded, forward hunching shoulders signal insecurity, defensiveness, or submission. Shoulders pulled too far back in an exaggerated military posture suggest compensation rather than natural authority. The ideal position falls between these extremes, shoulders relaxed but squared, creating a sense of openness across the chest while maintaining natural alignment with the spine. This posture signals both confidence and accessibility, a powerful combination for commanding respect. Third, weight distribution affects the stability of your presence, both literally and metaphorically. Notice how uncertain people shift their weight continuously, creating a sense of restlessness or readiness to retreat. By contrast, those with commanding presence distribute their weight evenly, creating a sense of groundedness and immovability. Practice standing with your weight balanced equally between both feet, positioned roughly shoulder-width apart. Feel the connection between your feet and the floor. This grounded stance communicates that you are firmly established in your position, physically and psychologically. When seated, avoid perching on the edge of your chair, which signals temporary commitment, or slouching back, which suggests disengagement. Instead, sit fully in your chair, maintaining your spinal alignment while occupying the space with quiet confidence. Fourth, head position dramatically influences how others perceive your authority. A slightly elevated chin, not raised in arrogance, but positioned in natural alignment with your spine, projects confidence and clarity. By contrast, a downturned or jutting head position suggests submission or aggression, respectively. The ideal head position creates what I call the horizon gaze, your eyes naturally falling on the horizon line when standing, conveying a sense, a vision and perspective rather than myopic focus on immediate concerns. Fifth, hand placement can either reinforce or undermine your authoritative presence. Fidgeting hands signal nervousness. Hidden hands suggest dishonesty. Tightly clasped hands communicate tension. Hands that move with deliberate purpose during speech and rest, comfortably visible when listening, project confidence and transparency. I remember working with a senior diplomat who struggled to maintain authority during tense negotiations. We noticed that under pressure, he would unconsciously hide his hands beneath the table or engage in nervous finger tapping. These subtle behaviors undermined his otherwise impressive presence. We developed a simple protocol. His hands would remain visible and still during challenging moments, either resting comfortably on the table or forming a relaxed steeple gesture. This adjustment alone significantly enhanced his commanding presence during high-stakes discussions. Sixth, proximity management, how you occupy and move through space, forms another critical component of authoritative posture. Those with commanding presence neither invade others' space nor surrender their own. They maintain appropriate distance while remaining fully engaged, creating what I call connected separation. Practice moving deliberately through space rather than rushing or hesitating. Take your time when entering rooms. Allow yourself to fully occupy your allocated space without apology or encroachment on others. Remember this, your posture isn't just how you hold yourself physically. It's a direct expression of how you hold yourself psychologically, how you view your place in the world and your relationship to others. The beautiful truth is this. By mindfully adjusting your physical posture, you can actually transform your internal experience of confidence and authority. Start with the outer form, and the inner reality will follow. In our next chapter, we'll explore another invisible but powerful dimension of commanding presence, the energy you carry. Because beyond posture, beyond expression, beyond words, your energetic presence communicates at a level that others feel rather than see. Respect is an emotional reaction. It's how people feel when you're near. That feeling comes from your energy, your intention, clarity, and presence. You've experienced this phenomenon. You walk into a room and immediately sense its emotional atmosphere. No words are exchanged, yet you know whether you've entered a space of tension, excitement, boredom, or harmony. This perception isn't mystical or supernatural. It's a sophisticated reading of subtle energetic signals that humans have evolved to detect. What most people don't realize is that they themselves are constantly broadcasting similar signals. The energy you carry, your internal emotional state, your intentions, your level of presence, creates an invisible field that others can sense, often without conscious awareness. This energetic presence can either command respect or undermine it, regardless of your words, credentials, or formal authority. I remember consulting for a multinational corporation where two executives with identical qualifications and similar communication styles produced dramatically different responses from their teams. The first executive's directives were met with enthusiastic engagement, the second's with minimal compliance. The difference wasn't in what they said, but in the energy from which they spoke. The first carried an energy of certainty, conviction, and genuine care. The second carried an energy of doubt, agenda, and self-concern. These qualities were never explicitly discussed, yet were clearly felt by everyone in their presence. But here's the crucial insight. This energy isn't some fixed, inherent quality you either have or lack. It's a state you can consciously cultivate through internal practices and external alignment. Let's explore the components of energy that command respect. First, intentional presence forms the foundation of commanding energy. Most people move through their days in a state of partial presence, physically present but mentally elsewhere, constantly distracted by internal dialogue or future concerns. This fragmented attention creates a scattered energy that others immediately sense. By contrast, when you bring your full attention to the present moment, to the person speaking, to the environment around you, to your own internal state, you create a quality of presence that naturally commands respect. Practice this. Before entering any significant interaction, take a moment to center yourself. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel your feet on the ground. Bring your awareness fully into the present moment. This simple practice dramatically shifts the energy you carry into the encounter. Second, emotional coherence powerfully influences how others experience your presence. When your external expression aligns with your internal state, when you're not hiding anger behind a false smile or masking insecurity with bravado, you create an energy of authenticity that people immediately trust. Most people operate with significant internal-external misalignment. They say yes while feeling no. They smile while feeling resentful. They project confidence while experiencing doubt. This incongruence creates an energy that others perceive as inauthentic, even if they can't articulate why. Developing emotional coherence requires radical self-honesty. You must become aware of your true feelings and learn to express them appropriately, rather than hiding them behind social masks. This doesn't mean unfiltered emotional expression. It means bringing your outer behavior into alignment with your inner truth. I worked with a senior leader who couldn't understand why his team seemed reluctant to bring him problems despite his explicit open-door policy. When we explored his energy during difficult conversations, the issue became clear. While verbally encouraging transparency, he was unconsciously projecting impatience and judgment through his energy. Our work focused on developing awareness of this disconnect and bringing his internal state into alignment with his stated values. As his energy became more congruent, his team's willingness to approach him with challenges dramatically increased. Third, intentional focus shapes the quality of your energetic presence. The direction of your attention, what you consistently focus on, creates a specific energetic signature that others can feel. When your attention constantly scans for problems, threats, or inadequacies, you generate an energy of criticism and negativity. When your focus regularly seeks opportunities, connections, and possibilities, you create an energy of optimism and creativity. This doesn't mean adopting false positivity. It means consciously directing your attention toward what you want to create rather than what you want to avoid. This intentional focus generates an energy that inspires rather than depletes. Fourth, personal congruence. The alignment between your words, actions, and values powerfully shapes your energetic impact. When you consistently live in accordance with your stated principles, you generate an energy of integrity that commands profound respect. Conversely, when your behavior contradicts your proclaimed values, you create an energy of hypocrisy that others immediately sense, even if they can't identify the specific inconsistency. Developing personal congruence requires regular self-examination. Are your daily choices aligned with your core values? Do your professional decisions reflect your personal principles? This ongoing alignment creates an energy of trustworthiness that others respond to at a deep level. Fifth, genuine caring. Authentic. Concern for others' well-being and success generates an energy that naturally commands respect. When your primary orientation is service rather than self-interest, you create a distinct energetic quality that others experience as both powerful and trustworthy. This isn't about performative caring or strategic empathy. It's about genuinely placing others' needs alongside your own in importance. This orientation creates an energy that simultaneously commands respect and inspires loyalty. I've observed this phenomenon repeatedly in my work with leaders across industries. Those who operate from authentic service orientation consistently generate more respect and following than those focused primarily on personal advancement, regardless of their technical competence or formal authority. Remember this: the energy you carry isn't just some intangible quality. It's the sum total of your intentions, your focus, your emotional state, your level of presence, and your degree of internal alignment. These elements create a felt experience for others that either commands respect or undermines it. The most powerful aspect of this understanding is that you can consciously cultivate the energy that commands respect. Through practices of presence, congruence, intentional focus, and genuine service, you can develop an energetic signature that naturally elicits respect without requiring words. In our next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive principle of commanding respect, the power of saying less. Because in a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the person who speaks selectively immediately stands apart. Talkers lose leverage. Listeners gain it. Respected people speak selectively and with purpose. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, where social media rewards constant expression, where meetings are dominated by those who speak the most rather than those who speak the wisest, the person who exercises verbal restraint immediately stands apart. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who speaks rarely, but whose words carry immense weight when they do? Someone whose voice causes the room to fall silent in anticipation? Someone whose opinion is sought precisely because it isn't freely offered? This quality, the strategic use of verbal restraint, is one of the most powerful tools for commanding respect without saying a word, or more accurately, by not saying many words. I remember observing a board meeting for a major corporation where 15 executives sat around a table discussing a critical strategic decision. 14 of them spoke, frequently interrupting each other, restating points, competing for airtime. The 15th, an older woman with decades of industry experience, remained silent for nearly an hour, listening intently, taking occasional notes. When she finally spoke, the room fell silent. Even the CEO, who had been freely interrupting, others gave her his complete attention. Her brief, measured contribution shifted the entire direction of the discussion. When asked later why her words carried such weight, the CEO said simply, "When Marion speaks, I know she's thought it through. She doesn't waste words. This is the power of selective speech. When you speak less, what you do say carries greater impact." But here's what most people don't understand. Speaking less isn't about being withdrawn or disengaged. It's about being strategic with your verbal contributions. It's about recognizing that every time you speak, you're making a withdrawal from your account of credibility and attention. The more selectively you make these withdrawals, the greater their value. The habit of verbal restraint communicates several powerful messages without explicitly stating them. First, it signals confidence. The compulsion to fill silence often stems from insecurity, from a fear that if you don't continually assert your presence, you'll be overlooked or undervalued. When you're comfortable with silence, you demonstrate that your sense of worth doesn't depend on constant verbal affirmation. Second, it indicates thoughtfulness. When you pause to consider before speaking, you communicate that you value accuracy and relevance over speed and volume. This quality immediately distinguishes you in a culture that increasingly prioritizes immediate response over thoughtful consideration. Third, it demonstrates respect for others. By listening more than you speak, you signal that you value others, perspectives that you're seeking to understand before being understood. This orientation naturally elicits reciprocal respect. Fourth, it creates curiosity. Human psychology is fascinating. We are naturally drawn to what is withheld. When you speak less, people become more interested in what you think. Your opinions gain value through their scarcity. I worked with a brilliant young executive who couldn't understand why his ideas weren't gaining traction, despite their merit. When I observed him in meetings, the issue became immediately clear. He shared every thought that came to mind, diluting his brilliant insights with trivial observations. Our work focused on developing what I call verbal discipline, the practice of mentally filtering his thoughts and expressing only those that added unique value to the discussion. Within weeks, his colleagues' reception of his ideas transformed dramatically. Nothing about the quality of his thinking had changed, only the selectivity of his expression. But developing verbal restraint isn't simply about speaking less. It's about speaking better. It's about increasing the signal-to-noise ratio in your communication. Here are specific practices to develop this skill. First, practice the pause. When asked a question, resist the urge to respond immediately. Take a moment, even a few seconds, to consider your response. This brief pause signals thoughtfulness and self-control. I remember working with a political candidate preparing for debates. His team was concerned about his tendency to answer questions too quickly, often before fully processing them. We developed a simple technique. He would take a deliberate breath before each response, using that moment to organize his thoughts. This small adjustment dramatically improved both the substance of his answers and the perception of his thoughtfulness. Second, eliminate verbal fillers. Words and phrases like you know, like, sort of, and I mean dilute your message and signal uncertainty. Practiced verbal restraint involves not just reducing the quantity of your words, but increasing their quality. Third, practice concision. Challenge yourself to express your ideas in fewer words without sacrificing clarity. This discipline forces you to distill your thinking to its essential elements, which naturally increases its impact. I often give clients this exercise. Take a 2-minute explanation of a concept and reduce it to 1 minute, then 30 seconds, then 15, without losing the core message. This practice develops the mental muscle of concise expression. Fourth, become comfortable with silence. Most people rush to fill conversational gaps out of discomfort with silence. Practice allowing these gaps to exist. You'll discover that they create space for deeper thinking and more meaningful exchange. Fifth, listen with full attention. True verbal restraint isn't just about not speaking, it's about fully engaging with others when they speak. This quality of attention creates a powerful presence that commands respect without words. I worked with a CEO who prided himself on being a good listener, but whose team reported feeling unheard. The disconnect became clear when I observed his listening behavior. While others spoke, he was often checking his phone, glancing at his computer, or displaying subtle signs of impatience. We focused on developing what I call committed listening, the practice of giving others your complete, undivided attention. This shift in his listening quality dramatically improved his team's perception of his leadership, even though his speaking patterns remained largely unchanged. Remember this: in a world where attention is increasingly fragmented and verbal restraint increasingly rare, the person who speaks selectively and listens intently naturally stands apart. They create a presence that commands respect not through volume or frequency of speech, but through its quality and timing. The paradox is powerful. To increase your impact, decrease your output. To strengthen your voice, use it more selectively. To command more respect, say less. In our next chapter, we'll explore a specific application of verbal restraint that particularly commands respect, the silent response to criticism. Because how you react when challenged reveals more about your character than almost anything else. The way you handle criticism says everything about your character. You don't win respect by defending yourself. You win it by not needing to. Consider this scenario. You're presenting an idea in a meeting when a colleague interrupts with pointed criticism. That approach has already been tried and failed. I'm surprised you're not aware of that history. What happens in your body at that moment? For most people, criticism triggers an immediate defensive response. Heart rate increases, muscles tense. Thoughts race to formulate a defense. The primitive brain activates its protection mechanisms, preparing for verbal combat. This reflexive defensiveness is deeply human. We're wired to protect ourselves, our ideas, our reputation, our sense of competence. But here's what most people don't understand. How you respond to criticism is one of the most powerful indicators of your inner strength and self-mastery. When you immediately defend yourself against criticism, you unconsciously communicate insecurity. You signal that your sense of worth is fragile enough to be threatened by another's opinion. You demonstrate that you need external validation to maintain your self-image. By contrast, when you respond to criticism with composed silence, with thoughtful consideration, rather than reflexive defense, you communicate remarkable inner strength. You signal that your sense of worth is secure enough to withstand scrutiny. You demonstrate that you value truth more than ego protection. I witnessed a perfect example of this during a high-stakes leadership meeting where a senior executive was presenting a bold strategic initiative. Midway through his presentation, a board member interrupted with a scathing critique, suggesting the executive had failed to consider obvious risks. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the executive, expecting a defensive response. Instead, he paused. He nodded slightly, acknowledging that he'd heard the criticism. He took a slow, deliberate breath. His posture remained open and relaxed. After a moment of what I call composed consideration, he responded with 4 words that dramatically elevated his perceived authority. That's a fair concern. He didn't rush to defend his analysis. He didn't counterattack. He didn't offer immediate justifications. He simply acknowledged the validity of considering the perspective offered. Then, after another brief pause, he thoughtfully addressed the substance of the concern. The impact on the room was palpable. His stock rose significantly in that moment, not despite the criticism, but because of how he handled it. His response demonstrated a rare quality, the strength to prioritize truth-seeking over ego protection. This capacity to respond to criticism with composed consideration rather than reflexive defense is a hallmark of true leadership presence. It immediately distinguishes you as someone who possesses uncommon self-mastery. But developing this capacity requires overcoming powerful instincts. Our brains are wired to perceive criticism as a threat. When someone questions our ideas, decisions, or competence, our limbic system often interprets this as a challenge to our status and safety. The resulting defensive response, whether aggressive, counterattack, or anxious self-justification, is largely automatic. Interrupting this automatic cycle requires both awareness and practice. Let's explore specific techniques for developing the silent response to criticism. First, recognize your physical response to criticism. Notice the sensations that arise, the tightening in your chest, the quickening of your breath, the tension in your shoulders. This physical awareness creates a crucial moment of choice between stimulus and response. Practice this the next time you receive criticism. Immediately bring your awareness to your physical sensations. Don't try to change them. Simply observe them with curiosity. This observational stance interrupts the automatic defensive cycle. Second, implement the power pause. When criticized, deliberately pause before responding. Take a slow, conscious breath. This brief interval creates space between the trigger and your response, allowing your higher brain functions to engage rather than reacting from primitive defense mechanisms. I worked with a surgeon who struggled with defensive reactions to any questioning of his medical decisions. His immediate, often dismissive responses were undermining his leadership despite his exceptional technical expertise. We developed a specific protocol. Whenever he felt challenged, he would pause and silently count to 3 before responding. This simple practice dramatically transformed his communication pattern, allowing him to respond thoughtfully rather than defensively. Third, adopt the learner's mindset. Train yourself to receive criticism as valuable data rather than personal attack. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this perspective? What truth might exist in this feedback, even if it's partially incorrect or poorly delivered? This orientation, seeing criticism as information rather than assault, fundamentally changes your relationship to feedback. It allows you to respond from curiosity rather than defensiveness. Fourth, distinguish between the content of criticism and your response to it. You don't have to agree with criticism to respond to it non-defensively. The silent response isn't about accepting all feedback as valid. It's about responding from centered strength rather than insecurity. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply, I appreciate your perspective. Let me consider that. This acknowledgement doesn't concede the accuracy of the criticism. It demonstrates the security to consider it without feeling threatened. Fifth, practice strategic vulnerability. When criticism contains truth, when you have made an error or oversight, acknowledging this directly demonstrates remarkable confidence. Phrases like, you're right, I hadn't considered that angle, or that's a valid point I missed, display the strength to prioritize truth over ego protection. I remember working with a CEO who transformed her organization's culture through this practice. Previously, employees had been afraid to raise concerns because the leadership team responded defensively to any implied criticism. When she began modeling strategic vulnerability, openly acknowledging when criticism was valid, it created psychological safety that dramatically improved decision-making throughout the organization. Sixth, recognize when silence is the most powerful response of all. In some situations, particularly when criticism is clearly motivated by the critic's issues rather than legitimate concerns, simple silence can be the most commanding response. This isn't sullen or angry silence. It's composed, attentive silence that communicates, "I've heard you. I'm secure enough not to react defensively. I'm choosing not to engage with this particular criticism." Remember this: the way you respond to criticism reveals your relationship with yourself. If you're secure in your worth and confident in your capacities, you don't need to defensively protect your ego. You can prioritize learning and growth over being right. You can respond from centered strength rather than insecurity. This capacity to receive criticism with composed consideration rather than reflexive defense immediately distinguishes you as someone of uncommon self-mastery. It commands respect without words because it demonstrates a quality that's vanishingly rare: the strength to place truth-seeking above ego protection. In our next chapter, we'll explore another dimension of commanding presence through silence: the strategic use of pauses and deliberate silence in conversation. Because sometimes saying nothing speaks volumes. A pause is powerful. Silence unsettles those who seek control. This chapter explores how to use quiet moments in conversation to shift power dynamics, command attention, and create space for respect. Consider the last important conversation you had. How comfortable were you with silence? Did you rush to fill? Pauses. Did you interrupt others before they finished speaking? Did you allow yourself to think before responding, or did you react immediately? Most people are profoundly uncomfortable with conversational silence. They treat pauses as problems, to be solved rather than tools to be wielded. They fill empty space with words, often unnecessary ones, simply to alleviate the tension that silence creates. But here's what most people don't understand. Strategic silence is one of the most powerful communication tools available to you. When used intentionally, pauses and moments of deliberate silence can command attention, shift power dynamics, and create space for deeper understanding. I remember observing a masterful negotiation where millions of dollars were at stake. The lead negotiator for one company made an aggressive final offer, then leaned back with a satisfied expression, clearly expecting immediate acquiescence or counter-proposal. Instead, his counterpart simply sat in silence. He maintained eye contact, kept his posture open and relaxed, but said absolutely nothing. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. The room grew increasingly tense. The first negotiator began to fidget, then to elaborate on his offer, then to offer concessions, all while his counterpart maintained composed silence. When the silent negotiator finally spoke, he had gained significant leverage without saying a word. The strategic use of silence had completely shifted the power dynamic in the room. This technique, the deliberate use of silence to create space and shift dynamics, is a hallmark of those who command respect without words. But it requires overcoming our natural discomfort with conversational gaps. Let's explore specific types of strategic silence and how to implement them. First, the response pause creates space for thoughtful consideration. When asked a question or presented with a proposal, resist the urge to respond immediately. Instead, pause for a few seconds. This brief interval communicates that you're giving the matter serious thought rather than reacting from reflex or rehearsed position. Practice this. In your next important conversation, commit to pausing for 3 seconds before responding to any significant question. Notice how this changes both the quality of your response and the attention with which it's received. I worked with a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why her insights weren't being fully valued, despite their quality. When I observed her in meetings, the issue became clear. She responded to questions so quickly that her answers seemed automatic rather than thoughtful. Her immediate responses, though accurate, lacked the weight that comes with perceived consideration. We implemented the response pause, a deliberate 3-second interval before answering important questions. This simple adjustment dramatically increased the perceived value of her contributions, even though their content remained essentially the same. Second, the power pause creates emphasis and commands attention. When making an important point, pause briefly before and after to set it apart from the surrounding conversation. This framing technique highlights the significance of your statement and creates space for it to land with full impact. I remember coaching a CEO preparing for a critical company-wide address during a period of organizational turmoil. His draft speech was content-rich, but delivered in a uniform pace that failed to distinguish between routine updates and crucial messages. We restructured his delivery to include strategic pauses before and after key points. These moments of silence transformed the speech's impact, creating emphasis that directed attention precisely where it was most needed. Third, the reflective silence creates space for processing and deepening. After someone shares something significant, whether an idea, concern, or personal disclosure, resist the urge to immediately respond. Allow a moment of silence for both of you to absorb and reflect on what's been shared. This practice is particularly powerful in leadership and mentoring contexts. When team members bring concerns or ideas, the space you create through reflective silence communicates genuine consideration. It signals that you're truly absorbing their perspective rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. Fourth, the comfort pause demonstrates your ease with silence. In negotiations and high-stakes discussions, the person least comfortable with silence typically concedes power to those more at ease with conversational gaps. Practice sitting comfortably in silence, maintaining relaxed eye contact and open body language. This capacity to be at ease when others are growing uncomfortable creates leverage without requiring words. Fifth, the invitational silence creates space for others to contribute. After asking a question, resist the urge to rephrase, elaborate, or answer it yourself if an immediate response isn't forthcoming. Instead, maintain attentive silence that invites thoughtful contribution. I worked with a leader whose team appeared disengaged in meetings despite his efforts to solicit their input. When I observed his facilitation style, the problem became evident. He would ask questions, but then fill the silence so quickly that thoughtful team members had no space to formulate contributions. We practiced what I call extended invitation, asking a question and then maintaining comfortable silence for up to 30 seconds to create space for reflective response. This simple adjustment transformed the team's engagement, drawing out perspectives that had previously remained unshared. Sixth, the status silence establishes authority through restraint. In group settings, the person who speaks least often, while maintaining full attention, often occupies the highest perceived status. Their selective contributions carry disproportionate weight, precisely because of their scarcity. This doesn't mean becoming withdrawn or disengaged. Rather, it means being strategically selective about your verbal contributions, ensuring that when you do speak, your words merit the attention they receive. Remember this: silence isn't empty. It's full of potential. It creates space for reflection, emphasis, and deeper understanding. It demonstrates confidence and self-control. It establishes authority through restraint, rather than dominance. The strategic use of silence immediately distinguishes you from those who feel compelled to fill every conversational gap. It creates a presence that commands attention, not through volume or quantity of words, but through the thoughtful quality of both your speech and your silence. In our next chapter, we'll explore another critical element of commanding respect without words: maintaining dignity under fire. Because your response in moments of challenge or attack reveals more about your character than any words you could speak. Adversity tests your poise. Do you crumble or stay composed? In the heat of conflict or challenge, those who remain calm command respect from everyone watching. Picture this scenario. You're presenting to a group when someone interrupts with a harsh criticism. The room goes silent. All eyes turn to you. In this moment, this crucible of public challenge, your response will either earn lasting respect or undermine your standing. This is what I call a dignity moment, a high-stakes situation where your composure under pressure reveals your true character and inner strength. These moments occur daily in professional and personal contexts. The unfair criticism in a meeting, the public disagreement with a superior, the blame for something outside your control, the personal attack disguised as professional feedback. How you handle these moments speaks volumes about who you are. It communicates more about your character than any words you could possibly speak. But here's what most people don't understand. Maintaining dignity under fire isn't about winning the argument. It's not about proving your critic wrong or defending your position. It's about demonstrating a quality of character that transcends the immediate situation. I witnessed a perfect example of this during a contentious board meeting where a senior executive was being aggressively questioned about a project delay. A board member's criticism crossed from professional to personal, suggesting the executive lacked the competence for his role. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to the executive, expecting an emotional defense or counterattack. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate breath. His posture remained upright and open. His facial expression stayed calm and attentive. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and even. "I understand your frustration with the delay. I share it. I'd be happy to walk through the specific factors that contributed to it and the measures we're implementing to get back on track." He neither defended his competence nor attacked his critic. He acknowledged the legitimate concern while refusing to engage with the personal attack. He maintained perfect composure while redirecting the conversation to productive problem-solving. The impact on the room was immediate. Even the critical board member moderated his tone in subsequent exchanges. The executive had demonstrated something powerful. He was unshakable. His dignity wasn't dependent on others' approval or fair treatment. It was self-possessed. This capacity to maintain composure under fire immediately distinguishes you as someone of exceptional character and inner strength. It commands respect without requiring a single word of self-defense or counterattack. But maintaining dignity under fire requires overcoming powerful instincts. When we feel attacked, our sympathetic nervous system activates, triggering our fight-flight-freeze response. Blood flows away from our prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for thoughtful decision-making, and toward our limbs and core, preparing us for physical battle or escape. This physiological response made perfect sense for our ancestors facing physical threats. It's far less helpful when facing social challenges that require thoughtful navigation rather than reflexive reaction. Overcoming this hardwired response requires both understanding and practice. Let's explore specific techniques for maintaining dignity under fire. First, develop physiological awareness. Notice the physical sensations that arise when you feel challenged or attacked, the tightening in your chest, the quickening of your breath, the tension in your muscles. This awareness creates a crucial interval between stimulus and response. Practice this. The next time you feel attacked or criticized, immediately bring your attention to your physical sensations. Don't try to change them. Simply observe them with curiosity. This observational stance interrupts the automatic defensive cycle. Second, implement strategic breathing. When under fire, deliberately slow and deepen your breathing. This physiological adjustment activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response that counterbalances the fight-flight-freeze reaction. I worked with a senior diplomat who struggled with emotional reactivity during tense negotiations. We developed a specific breathing protocol. When feeling attacked, she would take 3 slow breaths, inhaling for a count of 4 and exhaling for a count of 6. This simple practice dramatically improved her ability to maintain composure under pressure. Third, mentally reframe the attack. Train yourself to see criticism, even unfair criticism, as valuable information rather than personal assault. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this perspective? What legitimate concern might underlie this attack, even if it's being poorly expressed? This reframing shifts your orientation from defensive self-protection to curious exploration, allowing you to respond from centered strength rather than wounded ego. Fourth, maintain open body language. When we feel attacked, our bodies instinctively contract, shoulders hunch, arms cross, posture collapses. These physical manifestations of defensiveness communicate weakness rather than strength. Practice maintaining open, relaxed body language. Even when feeling challenged, keep your shoulders back, your chest open, your arms uncrossed, your facial expression attentive rather than contracted. This physical stance not only signals confidence to others, but actually generates it internally. Fifth, seek understanding before resolution. When under fire, resist the urge to immediately defend, explain, or counterattack. Instead, ask questions that demonstrate a genuine desire to understand the concern beneath the criticism. Phrases like, "Help me understand your perspective more." Fully, or could you elaborate on your specific concerns, shift the dynamic from confrontation to exploration. They demonstrate the security to seek understanding rather than rushing to self-defense. Sixth, separate the personal from the substantive. When criticism contains both legitimate concerns and personal attacks, acknowledge the former while declining to engage with the latter. This selective response demonstrates the discernment to address what matters while refusing to be drawn into unproductive conflict. I remember coaching a CEO through a particularly challenging shareholder meeting where an investor combined legitimate questions about strategy with personal attacks on the CEO's leadership. We developed a specific approach. For each mixed comment, he would acknowledge the substantive concern while simply not responding to the personal element. This selective engagement demonstrated remarkable self-control and kept the discussion focused on matters of genuine importance rather than personal animosity. Remember this, your dignity isn't determined by how others treat you, it's determined by how you respond to that treatment. When you maintain composure under fire, when you refuse to be provoked into defensiveness, counterattack, or emotional reactivity, you demonstrate a quality of character that commands profound respect. The person who remains unshaken when everyone else is rattled immediately stands apart. They create a presence that communicates self-possession, inner strength, and principled leadership. They earn respect not by demanding it, but by demonstrating through their composed response to challenge that they are worthy of it. In our next chapter, we'll explore another critical dimension of commanding respect without words, the invisible boundaries of self-respect. Because how you allow others to treat you silently instructs them in how you expect to be treated. Respect starts from within. If you don't respect yourself, no one else will. Consider this paradox, the boundaries that most powerfully command. Others' respect are those you never need to verbally articulate. They're communicated through your behavior, your responses, your presence. They're the invisible lines drawn by self-respect. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They think of them primarily as verbal statements, explicit declarations of what they will or won't tolerate. While such declarations have their place, the most powerful boundaries are those silently established through consistent behavior that reflects your innate sense of self-worth. I remember coaching a brilliant young professional who couldn't understand why colleagues repeatedly interrupted her in meetings, assigned her administrative tasks despite her technical expertise, and generally treated her with less respect than her peers. Her technical qualifications were impeccable, yet something in her presence was inviting dismissive treatment. The issue became clear when I observed her in professional settings. Her behavior was silently communicating that she didn't expect respect. She would yield her speaking turn at the slightest interruption. She would accept inappropriate tasks without question. She would physically minimize her presence, speaking softly, taking minimal space, avoiding direct eye contact when stating opinions. These behaviors weren't conscious choices. They were unconscious expressions of her internal relationship with herself, her beliefs about her worthiness of respect. Her internal boundaries were weak, and her external experience reflected this inner reality. This pattern is remarkably common. The treatment you receive from others is largely a reflection of the treatment you've silently indicated you expect. Your invisible boundaries, the lines drawn by your sense of self-worth, shape others' behavior toward you more powerfully than any verbal declarations. But here's the empowering truth: these boundaries can be consciously established and maintained. You can develop a presence that silently commands respect by cultivating behaviors that reflect genuine self-respect. Let's explore the key elements of invisible boundaries that command respect. First, physical presence sets the foundation. How? You occupy space. Your posture, your movements, your physical self-assertion communicates volumes about your expected treatment. People who command respect maintain aligned posture, claim appropriate space, and move with deliberate purpose rather than tentative hesitation. Practice standing and sitting with dignity, spine aligned, shoulders relaxed but squared, head positioned, neutrally rather than tilted downward in submission or thrust forward in aggression. This physical stance silently communicates that you expect to be treated with respect. Second, vocal presence powerfully shapes others' responses. The quality of your voice, its projection, pacing, and tonal stability signals your comfort with being heard and your expectation of attention. People who command respect speak at a measured pace with consistent volume and tonal control. I worked with an exceptional designer whose ideas were routinely overlooked despite their quality. When we analyzed his communication patterns, the issue became evident. He would physically and vocally diminish when presenting his concepts, speaking more quickly, more softly, with rising intonation that made statements sound like questions. We focused on developing what I call vocal authority, speaking at a deliberate pace, maintaining consistent volume, and using definitive rather than questioning intonation. This shift in vocal presence dramatically changed how his ideas were received, even though their content remained the same. Third, response patterns establish powerful, invisible boundaries. How you react when your boundaries are tested, when you're interrupted, dismissed, or treated disrespectfully, determines whether those boundaries strengthen or erode. People who command respect respond to boundary violations with calm, measured assertion rather than either passive acceptance or aggressive defensiveness. They don't lecture or scold. They simply maintain their standards through consistent response. When interrupted, they continue their thought with calm persistence. I'd like to finish my point. When dismissed, they maintain their position with quiet confidence. I believe this perspective merits consideration. When treated disrespectfully, they address the behavior directly, but without escalation. That approach doesn't work for me. These responses aren't confrontational or emotional. They're simple, clear reestablishments of invisible boundaries. They communicate that respect is expected without needing to explicitly demand it. Fourth, time and attention boundaries silently signal your value. How you allocate your time and attention, what you prioritize, what you defer, what you decline, communicates your sense of worth more clearly than words ever could. People who command respect make deliberate choices about their time and attention. They don't automatically accommodate every request. They don't respond instantly to every demand. They demonstrate through their behavior that their time has value and their attention is an asset to be respected rather than a resource to be exploited. Coached a senior leader who struggled with being constantly interrupted by direct reports with non-urgent matters. Despite his verbal requests for more structured communication, the interruptions continued. The issue wasn't his verbal boundary, it was his behavioral response. By immediately stopping his work to address every interruption, he was training his team that interrupting was effective. We established a new protocol. When interrupted with non-urgent matters, he would make eye contact, smile, and say, "I'll be available at 3." This simple, consistent response, neither dismissive nor immediately accommodating, established an invisible boundary that his team quickly learned to respect. Fifth, conversational boundaries create powerful norms without explicit rules. How you engage in dialogue, what topics you discuss, what language you accept, what conversational dynamics you participate in, silently establishes standards for interaction. People who command respect maintain conversational dignity. They don't engage in gossip. They don't participate in disparagement of others. They don't respond to inappropriate questions or comments. They maintain standards not through policing others' speech, but through their own selective engagement. This selective participation isn't about judging others, it's about maintaining personal standards that silently command respect. When you decline to participate in negative conversational patterns, you establish invisible boundaries that influence group dynamics without requiring verbal correction. Remember this: the most powerful boundaries are those you never need to articulate. They're established through consistent behavior that reflects genuine self-respect. They're maintained not through defending or explaining, but through calmly persisting in behaviors aligned with your values and worth. When you develop these invisible boundaries, when your physical presence, vocal quality, response patterns, time allocation, and conversational engagement all reflect genuine self-respect, you create a presence that naturally commands respect from others, not because you've demanded it, but because you've demonstrated through every aspect of your behavior that it's what you expect and deserve. In our next chapter, we'll explore another dimension of commanding presence: stillness as a superpower. Because in a world of constant motion and reaction, the capacity for purposeful stillness immediately distinguishes you as someone of unusual self-mastery. Stillness is more than absence of motion, it's presence of mastery. It's choosing when to move, speak, and react. In a world of constant movement, perpetual noise, and reflexive reaction, the person who can maintain purposeful stillness immediately stands apart. Their capacity for composed inaction, for being fully present without feeling compelled to fill space with movement or words, signals a rare quality of self-possession. But here's what most people don't understand. True stillness isn't passive. It isn't disengagement or frozen hesitation. It's a dynamic, powerful state of being fully present without succumbing to the compulsion for unnecessary action. It's the deliberate choice to move, speak, and react only when such action serves a purpose. I remember observing a high-stakes negotiation between two corporate titans. One executive, younger, eager to prove himself, was in constant motion. He fidgeted with his pen, shifted in his chair, gestured broadly when speaking, and filled every silence with words or movement. His counterpart, older, more experienced, exhibited remarkable stillness. His hands rested comfortably on the table. His posture was upright but relaxed. His facial expression remained attentive and engaged, but didn't fluctuate dramatically with each emotional shift in the conversation. When he spoke, his movements were minimal and purposeful. When others spoke, he maintained complete attentive stillness. The contrast was striking and telling. The still executive commanded far greater authority in the room. His selective movement and speech carried weight precisely because of their scarcity. His stillness communicated a profound self-command that made his occasional action all the more impactful. This quality, the capacity for purposeful stillness, is a hallmark of those who command deep respect. It signals both inner and outer mastery, control of one's own impulses, and command of one's environment. Think about the people you most respect. Chances are they possess this quality of selective movement and speech, this capacity to be fully present without nervous fidgeting, excessive gesturing, or compulsive talking. Their actions and words have weight because they emerge from a foundation of self-contained stillness. But developing this capacity requires overcoming powerful cultural and psychological forces. We live in a society that equates constant activity with productivity, that associates movement with engagement, that interprets stillness as disinterest or disengagement. Most people have never learned the art of purposeful stillness. They've developed habits of unnecessary movement, fidgeting, shifting, gesturing, that dissipate their presence rather than concentrating it. They feel compelled to fill silence with words, to occupy space with movement, to react visibly to every stimulus. These habits aren't just external behaviors. They reflect an inner restlessness, an inability to be completely present without reaching for distraction or expression. This inner agitation manifests physically, diminishing the power of presence. Developing stillness as a superpower begins with understanding its components. Let's explore the elements of purposeful stillness. First, physical stillness forms the foundation. Most people engage in constant unconscious movement, bouncing legs, tapping fingers, shifting position, adjusting clothing, touching their face or hair. These movements are often so habitual that they occur below conscious awareness. Practice deliberate physical stillness. Sit or stand in a comfortable, aligned position and maintain it without fidgeting or adjusting. Notice the impulses to move and allow them to arise and pass without acting on them. This practice, simply being still, builds the capacity to be physically present without restless movement. I worked with a brilliant attorney who couldn't understand why juries seemed less receptive to her arguments than to those of her colleagues, despite her exceptional legal reasoning. When I observed her in court, the issue became immediately clear. Her constant movement, pacing, gesturing, shifting weight, created a sense of nervous energy that undermined her authority. We focused intensively on developing what I call centered stillness, the capacity to stand in one position with minimal movement while speaking. This simple adjustment dramatically increased her perceived authority and credibility with juries. Second, facial stillness conveys remarkable self-command. Most people's expressions fluctuate continuously, reacting visibly to every emotional nuance in conversation. While appropriate expressiveness builds connection, excessive facial reactivity can undermine authority. People who command deep respect maintain what I call engaged neutrality, a facial expression that communicates attentive presence without excessive reaction to every statement or emotion. This quality of facial stillness suggests a person who is responsive but not reactive, engaged but not easily perturbed. Practice maintaining an attentive, present facial expression without dramatic shifts in response to each emotional stimulus. This doesn't mean becoming expressionless, it means becoming selectively expressive, choosing rather than reflexively reacting. Third, gestural economy multiplies impact. When every statement is accompanied by expansive gestures, no single movement carries particular significance. By contrast, when you gesture selectively and purposefully, each movement commands attention precisely because of its rarity. People who command respect use fewer, more deliberate gestures. Their movements are purposeful rather than nervous or habitual. This selective motion creates emphasis exactly where intended rather than creating a constant visual noise that distracts from their message. I coached a senior diplomat who struggled with being taken seriously in multilateral negotiations despite his substantive expertise. When we analyzed his communication patterns, a key issue emerged. His constant, expansive gesturing created an impression of nervous energy rather than contained authority. We developed a practice of gestural fasting, periods of deliberate gestural restraint during important communications. This selective stillness dramatically enhanced his commanding presence in high-stakes diplomatic settings. Fourth, verbal stillness, the capacity to be comfortable with silence, communicates remarkable self-possession. Most people rush to fill conversational gaps, speaking to alleviate their own discomfort with silence, rather than because they have something valuable to contribute. People who command respect are comfortable with silence. They speak when they have something meaningful to say, rather than from discomfort with quietude. This selective speech gives their words disproportionate weight when they do choose to speak. Practice maintaining comfortable silence in conversation. Resist the urge to fill pauses. Allow space after others finish speaking rather than immediately jumping in. This capacity for verbal stillness immediately distinguishes you as someone with unusual self-command. Fifth, reactive stillness, the ability to receive information without immediate visible reaction, signals exceptional emotional self-regulation. Most people react instantly to new information, particularly if it's surprising or challenging. Their faces, bodies, and words immediately broadcast their emotional response. People who command deep respect maintain what I call response space, a brief interval between receiving information and visibly reacting to it. This isn't suppression of natural response. It's the creation of a chosen rather than automatic reaction. Practice creating this response space. When receiving surprising or challenging information, take a breath before responding. Allow yourself to process the information internally before expressing your reaction externally. This capacity for momentary stillness in the face of provocation immediately signals unusual self-mastery. Remember this: stillness is power concentrated. When you eliminate unnecessary movement, speech, and reaction, you focus your presence rather than diffusing it. You command attention not through constant activity, but through its meaningful absence. The capacity for purposeful stillness immediately distinguishes you in a culture of perpetual motion. It creates a presence that draws others' attention precisely because it contrasts so sharply with the restless activity that surrounds it. It communicates a quality of self-possession that naturally commands respect without requiring words. In our next chapter, we'll explore the fascinating science behind a critical element of commanding presence, mirror neurons and social influence. Because your calm, confident presence doesn't just command respect, it actually shapes the neurological experience of those around you. People reflect what you project. If you radiate calm, they calm down. If you show certainty, they follow. Neuroscience backs this. In the early 1990s, a team of Italian researchers made an accidental discovery that would fundamentally change our understanding of human interaction. While studying the motor neurons of macaque monkeys, they noticed something remarkable. Certain neurons fired not only when a monkey performed an action, but also when it observed another monkey performing the same action. These neurons, later named mirror neurons, essentially created a neural simulation of observed behavior. When one monkey watched another reach for food, the watching monkey's brain activated as if it were performing the action itself. Subsequent research confirmed that humans possess an even more sophisticated mirror neuron system. Our brains are constantly, unconsciously simulating the actions, emotions, and even intentions we observe in others. This discovery has profound implications for understanding how your presence affects those around you. When you project calm confidence, you don't just communicate it, you actually trigger neural patterns of calm confidence in others' brains. When you embody certainty, you neurologically transmit that state. When you maintain composed stillness, you create a physiological template that others unconsciously adopt. This isn't metaphorical or philosophical, it's neurological. Your internal state literally shapes the brain activity and thus the emotional experience of those around you. I remember consulting for a hospital emergency department during a period of organizational crisis. Staff morale was plummeting, patient complaints were rising, and the environment had become chaotic and tense. The department head, though clinically brilliant, moved through the space with visible stress and urgency. She spoke quickly, moved rapidly, and reacted emotionally to setbacks. Though her words encouraged calm, her presence broadcast anxiety. After working with her to develop what I call deliberate embodiment, consciously projecting calm, measured presence even during crisis, the department's atmosphere transformed dramatically. Patient satisfaction scores improved, staff reported feeling less stressed. The quality of clinical decision-making enhanced. Nothing about the external circumstances had changed. The emergency department remained as busy and challenging as before. What changed was the neurological template being broadcast by the leader. Her calm, composed presence triggered similar neural patterns in her team, creating a cascade effect that transformed the entire environment. This mirror neuron phenomenon explains why the presence you embody, not just the words you speak, so powerfully influences those around you. Your internal state becomes contagious through neurological transmission. But here's what most people don't understand. This process works in both directions. Just as your state influences others, their states influence you, unless you've developed the capacity to maintain your internal condition regardless of external circumstances. This is why emotional independence, the ability to maintain your chosen state despite others' emotions, is essential for commanding respect. When you remain calm despite surrounding anxiety, confident despite others' doubt, composed despite surrounding chaos, you become a neurological anchor for everyone present. Let's explore specific practices for leveraging mirror neurons to enhance your commanding presence. First, recognize the primacy of state over content. Before important interactions, focus on cultivating your internal condition, your level of calm, confidence, and clarity, rather than simply rehearsing your words. Your neurological state will transmit more powerfully than your verbal content. Practice what I call state preparation. Before significant encounters, take a few moments to center yourself, regulate your breathing, and consciously embody the qualities you wish to project. This internal alignment creates the template you'll neurologically transmit to others. I worked with a CEO preparing for a critical investor presentation during a challenging financial period. While his team focused exclusively on perfecting the content of his speech, we devoted equal attention to his internal state before and during delivery. We developed a specific pre-presentation practice, 5 minutes of measured breathing while mentally rehearsing the feeling of absolute conviction in the company's future. This state preparation dramatically enhanced his impact, with investors later commenting on his palpable confidence despite challenging circumstances. Second, maintain state independence in the face of contrary emotions. When those around you project anxiety, doubt, or hostility, their mirror neurons are attempting to trigger matching states in your brain. Resisting this unconscious influence requires deliberate attention to your internal condition. Practice what I call emotional anchoring, maintaining your chosen state even when surrounded by contrary emotions. This capacity to remain neurologically stable despite external instability immediately distinguishes you as someone of unusual self-command. I coached a senior diplomat who regularly negotiated in hostile environments. We developed his capacity to maintain calm, composed presence even when others deliberately projected anger or aggression. This emotional independence not only preserved his cognitive clarity, but often de-escalated tense situations as his calm state neurologically influenced his counterparts. Third, Strategically leverage emotional contagion. Once you've developed state independence, you can deliberately project emotional states that serve your objectives. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding that your internal condition inevitably affects others neurologically. Before challenging conversations, consciously embody the emotional state you wish to establish. If you want a collaborative atmosphere, embody openness and curiosity. If you need to establish boundaries, embody calm certainty. If you're addressing conflict, embody composed resolution. I remember working with a leader preparing for a difficult meeting with a team in conflict. Rather than focusing on what she would say, we focused on what she would embody. She deliberately cultivated and projected a state of calm clarity combined with compassionate resolve. The meeting's dynamics reflected this neurological template. Though the issues remained challenging, the conversation maintained a quality of composed problem-solving rather than emotional reactivity. Her embodied state had established the template for the entire interaction. Fourth, recognize and interrupt negative neurological loops. In groups, emotional states can create self-reinforcing cycles as mirror neurons continuously amplify the dominant emotion. Anxiety triggers anxiety, which triggers more anxiety, in an escalating spiral. When you notice such cycles developing, deliberately interrupt them by projecting a contrary state. If tension is rising, consciously embody calm. If doubt is spreading, deliberately project certainty. Your neurological template can reset the emotional environment. I worked with a medical team that had developed a pattern of escalating stress during complex procedures. We trained the lead surgeon to recognize these spirals and deliberately reset them through what I call projected composure, consciously embodying and broadcasting calm confidence even as technical challenges emerged. This practice dramatically improved both team performance and patient outcomes. The surgeon's neurological state provided a template that interrupted the escalating stress cycle and established a more productive emotional environment. Fifth, develop presence that neurologically commands attention. Certain qualities of presence, particularly calm confidence combined with attentive focus, naturally draw and hold others' attention at a neurological level. This combination creates what neuroscientists call an attentional magnet, a presence that naturally pulls focus. Practice embodying this dual quality, inner calm paired with outer attentiveness. This state creates a neurological signature that others' brains instinctively track and attune to, establishing natural authority without requiring words or formal position. Remember this: you're constantly broadcasting a neurological template that shapes others' experience. Your internal state isn't private, it's contagious. When you develop the capacity to consciously cultivate and maintain states of calm confidence, composed certainty, and attentive presence, you create a neurological environment that naturally commands respect. The science is clear. Your presence doesn't just communicate, it literally reshapes the brain activity of those around you. This understanding transforms how you approach influence. It's not just about what you say or do, it's about the neurological template you embody and transmit. In our next chapter, we'll explore another critical dimension of commanding respect without words, the power of reliability. Because consistent, dependable behavior builds trust more powerfully than any verbal assurance ever could. People respect what they can trust, and trust is built through consistency, not talk. Consider two colleagues. The first speaks eloquently about responsibility and commitment. In meetings, they promise ambitious deliverables and timelines. They assure everyone of their dedication. But their follow-through is inconsistent. Deadlines slip, quality varies, commitments require reminders. The second speaks less about their values. They make fewer promises and less ambitious claims. But what they commit to, they deliver consistently, thoroughly on time without reminders or excuses. Which colleague commands more respect? The answer is obvious. This principle, that reliability builds respect more powerfully than words ever could, applies across every domain of professional and personal life. Your consistent behavior creates a silent testimony that speaks volumes about your character and competence. But here's what most people don't understand. Reliability isn't just about keeping promises, though that's certainly fundamental. It's about creating a pattern of behavior so consistent that it becomes a foundation others can build upon. It's about becoming a known quantity in a world of variables. I remember consulting for an organization undergoing significant leadership transition. Among several qualified candidates for the CEO position, the board ultimately selected someone whose technical credentials were actually less impressive than some alternatives. When I asked about this decision, the board chair said something profound. In times of uncertainty, we needed someone we could absolutely count on. His reliability isn't just a trait, it's his superpower. This insight captures something essential. In an increasingly unpredictable world, reliability becomes exponentially valuable. The person who consistently does what they say they'll do, who shows up when expected, who maintains standards regardless of circumstances, naturally commands a level of respect that more variable performers, even more talented ones, cannot achieve. Let's explore the specific dimensions of reliability that command respect without words. First, commitment integrity. The alignment between what you say you'll do and what you actually do forms the foundation of respect commanding reliability. Most people treat commitments casually, readily making promises they later modify, delay, or abandon. This pattern, even with plausible explanations, gradually erodes their credibility. People who command deep respect maintain impeccable commitment integrity. They make promises carefully, considering their capacity and circumstances before committing. They treat their word as a binding contract rather than a flexible intention. And when circumstances genuinely prevent fulfillment, they proactively communicate and reset expectations rather than waiting to be asked. Practice what I call commitment. Conservatism, making fewer, more carefully considered promises and then fulfilling them completely. This pattern of behavior, modest commitments impeccably fulfilled, builds extraordinary trust over time. I worked with a promising executive whose career had plateaued despite his intelligence and technical skill. When we analyzed the pattern, a clear issue emerged. His colleagues and superiors had learned they couldn't fully rely on his commitments. He consistently promised more than he delivered, requiring follow-up and adjustment. We implemented a deliberate practice of commitment integrity, making fewer, more conservative promises and then exceeding them rather than the reverse. Within months, his reputation began to transform. His words carried more weight in meetings. His opinions received more serious consideration. His reliability had begun to command the respect his talent deserved. Second, temporal reliability, consistency. In your relationship with time, powerfully shapes others' respect. Most people have a casual relationship with punctuality. They arrive approximately on time to meetings. They deliver work more or less when promised. They respond to communications when they get around to it. People who command respect demonstrate impeccable temporal reliability. They arrive not just on time, but slightly early for commitments. They deliver work when promised or before. They respond to communications promptly and predictably. This consistency regarding time signals both respect for others and exceptional self-management. I remember observing a fascinating dynamic in a major corporation. A senior executive, though not the highest-ranking person in most meetings, consistently commanded unusual deference from colleagues. When I analyzed the pattern, one factor stood out. In 10 years, she had never once been late to a meeting, never missed a deadline, never required a reminder for a commitment. Her temporal reliability had created a foundation of respect that enhanced every other aspect of her leadership. Third, standard consistency. Maintaining the same level of quality regardless of circumstances builds profound trust over time. Most people's performance fluctuates based on external conditions. They deliver excellent work when well rested, inspired, and free from pressure, but their quality degrades under stress, time constraints, or competing demands. People who command deep respect maintain remarkable standard consistency. The quality of their work, their communication, their presence remains steady, regardless of external circumstances. This reliability creates absolute confidence in their performance, even in challenging situations. I coached a surgeon renowned for his exceptional technical skill, but even more respected for his standard consistency. Whether operating at 8 BOPO AM or 2 KN AM, whether on a routine case or during a crisis, his performance maintained the same high standard. This reliability had earned him extraordinary respect from colleagues who knew exactly what to expect regardless of circumstances. This quality doesn't require perfection, it requires predictability. People respect knowing exactly what they'll get from you, even if it's not always the absolute highest standard possible. Consistency builds more trust than occasional brilliance interspersed with variability. Fourth, emotional reliability, consistency in your reactions and temperament, powerfully shapes others' willingness to engage authentically. Most people's emotional responses fluctuate significantly based on stress, fatigue, or circumstance. They're patient and considerate one day, irritable and dismissive the next. This emotional variability creates wariness in others who never know which version they'll encounter. People who command deep respect maintain remarkable emotional consistency. Their temperament, responsiveness, and basic treatment of others remain steady regardless of their personal circumstances. This reliability creates psychological safety that fosters honest communication and authentic engagement. I worked with a leader whose technical decisions were respected, but whose emotional volatility undermined trust. Team members became reluctant to bring problems to her attention, never knowing whether they'd encounter the supportive or the critical version of their leader. We focused on developing what I call emotional consistency, maintaining the same basic quality of response regardless of circumstance, not suppressing authentic feelings, but ensuring that her fundamental treatment of others remained reliable even when experiencing stress or frustration. This shift in her leadership transformed team dynamics. Psychological safety increased. Communication became more honest. Problems were identified earlier, all because her emotional reliability had created a foundation of trust that her technical expertise alone couldn't establish. Fifth, process reliability, consistency in how you approach tasks and solve problems builds confidence in your judgment beyond specific outcomes. Most people's methodologies vary significantly from situation to situation. They're thorough in some contexts, hasty in others, systematic at times, improvised at others. This variability creates uncertainty about the soundness of their conclusions. People who command deep respect maintain consistent processes regardless of circumstance. Their approach to gathering information, evaluating options, and reaching decisions follows reliable patterns that inspire confidence in their conclusions, even when outcomes aren't immediately visible. I remember consulting for a judge whose decisions were rarely appealed and typically upheld when they were. His reputation for soundness didn't stem from consistently ruling one way or another, but from the impeccable consistency of his process. Attorneys appearing before him knew exactly what to expect, not in terms of outcome, but in terms of the methodology by which he would reach his decision. This process reliability created extraordinary respect for his judgment, even among those who disagreed with specific rulings. Remember this: in a world of increasing uncertainty, the person who creates islands of absolute reliability naturally commands profound respect. Your consistent behavior, your impeccable follow-through, your temporal predictability, your standard maintenance, your emotional steadiness, your process reliability speaks more eloquently about your character than any words you could possibly speak, the beautiful irony is this. While many seek respect through impression management, through carefully crafted images and statements, the most reliable path to genuine respect is the least flashy, simply doing what you say you'll do, when you say you'll do it at the standard you've promised, time after time after time. In our next chapter, we'll explore another subtle but powerful dimension of commanding respect without words, the art of controlled expression. Because your face communicates your intentions, attention, and internal state more eloquently than words ever could. Your facial expressions are a language. What do yours say? Think about the last important conversation you had. While you were focusing on your words, your face was telling its own story, communicating your emotions, intentions, and reactions more candidly than your carefully chosen language. Most people are largely unaware of their facial expressions. They focus on verbal communication while unconsciously broadcasting their unfiltered emotional states through micro-expressions, subtle shifts in facial muscle tension, changes in eye movement, and variations in skin coloration. This unconscious facial communication often undermines their verbal message. They say they're confident while their expression reveals doubt. They claim to be receptive to feedback while their face signals defensiveness. They assert they're listening attentively while their eyes betray disinterest or impatience. But here's what most people don't understand. Your facial expressions aren't simply automatic reflections of your internal state. They're a communication channel you can learn to manage with remarkable precision. Just as you choose your words, you can choose your expressions, not to deceive, but to accurately convey your intended message without unintended emotional leakage. This capacity, the art of controlled expression, is a hallmark of those who command deep respect. Their faces communicate exactly what they intend to communicate, no more and no less. This alignment between intended and actual expression creates an impression of exceptional self-command and emotional intelligence. I remember observing a high-stakes diplomatic negotiation between nations with historical tensions. One diplomat, though junior in rank, commanded unusual respect from all parties. As I analyzed the interaction patterns, a key factor emerged: her extraordinary control of facial expression. When others made provocative statements, her face remained attentive but neutral, revealing neither offense nor agreement. When discussing sensitive issues, her expressions conveyed appropriate seriousness without telegraphing her position through unconscious reactions. When listening to others, her face demonstrated engaged interest without premature judgment. This controlled expressiveness wasn't a poker face. It was selective, deliberate expression that supported her objectives rather than undermining them. She smiled authentically when building rapport, showed appropriate concern when acknowledging difficulties, and maintained neutral attentiveness when others were attempting to provoke reaction. Her facial discipline gave her a significant advantage. While others unconsciously revealed their thoughts and reactions through uncontrolled expressions, she maintained an informational asymmetry that enhanced her negotiating position. She could read others while remaining herself unreadable, except when she chose to be. This capacity isn't about suppressing natural expressiveness. It's about developing conscious choice regarding what your face communicates. It's about bringing your expressions into alignment with your intentions, rather than allowing them to broadcast unfiltered reactions. Let's explore specific elements of controlled expression that command respect without words. First, neutral attentiveness forms the foundation of controlled expression. Most people's default expression during professional interactions is either unconsciously negative, slightly furrowed brow, tense jaw, narrowed eyes, or artificially positive, fixed smile, exaggerated nodding. Both extremes undermine credibility. People who command respect cultivate a default expression of neutral attentiveness, a relaxed but engaged face that communicates interested presence without premature judgment. This expression, sometimes called the executive face, creates a foundation of composed receptivity that enhances authority. Practice this. Stand before a mirror and release all tension from your facial muscles while maintaining alert eyes. Notice the difference between this expression and either a fixed smile or a stern countenance. This neutral but attentive expression should become your default in professional settings, your home base from which more specific expressions emerge. When appropriate, I worked with a brilliant physician whose patients often misinterpreted her concentration as disapproval or concern. Her default expression while listening, slightly furrowed brow, compressed lips, unintentionally communicated negative judgment even when she was simply processing information. We developed what I call listening face awareness, conscious attention to her default expression when receiving information. By maintaining a more neutral, attentive expression, she dramatically improved patient communication without changing her verbal approach at all. Second, appropriate expressiveness builds connection while maintaining authority. While excessive or uncontrolled emotional display undermines perceived competence, appropriate expressiveness builds genuine human connection that enhances influence. People who command respect demonstrate selective, contextually appropriate expressiveness. They smile authentically when building rapport. They show appropriate concern when addressing difficulties. They display measured enthusiasm when acknowledging success. These expressions are genuine but controlled, proportionate to the situation, and aligned with their objectives. I coached a senior executive whose expressionless demeanor was undermining his leadership, despite his technical excellence. His team perceived him as cold and inaccessible, limiting his ability to inspire and motivate. We focused on developing what I call strategic expressiveness, deliberately incorporating appropriate emotional display into his communication while maintaining his fundamental composure. This balanced approach, neither emotionally flat nor excessively demonstrative, significantly enhanced his leadership impact. Third, expression-word alignment creates an impression of exceptional integrity. When your facial expressions precisely match your verbal message, you create a powerful sense of congruence that builds trust. Conversely, even slight misalignment between expression and words creates cognitive dissonance that undermines credibility. People who command respect maintain impeccable alignment between their verbal and facial communication. When they express confidence, their face reflects genuine certainty. When they offer support, their expression conveys authentic concern. When they commit to action, their face communicates real resolve. Practice this. Before important communications, clearly identify the core feeling underlying your message. As you speak, consciously align your facial expression with this underlying emotion. This congruence creates an impression of rare authenticity that significantly enhances your impact. Fourth, micro-expression management prevents unintended emotional leakage that undermines credibility. Micro-expressions, extremely brief facially, movements lasting less than 1/5 of a second, often reveal emotions we're attempting to conceal. These fleeting expressions frequently contradict our words, creating subtle but powerful impressions of dishonesty or uncertainty. People who command deep respect have developed awareness of their micro-expression tendencies, particularly under stress. They recognize the specific emotional leakage they're prone to, the momentary sneer when discussing a difficult colleague, the flash of anxiety when addressing areas of uncertainty, the brief smile when hearing of a competitor's setback, and have learned to manage these unconscious reactions. I worked with a negotiator who couldn't understand why counterparts often seemed to identify his reservation price, despite his careful verbal discipline. When we analyzed recordings of his negotiations, the issue became clear. Momentary micro-expressions of concern or relief were signaling his reactions to proposals, giving counterparts invaluable information about his true position. We developed specific techniques for managing these micro-expressions, including what I call conscious neutrality, maintaining awareness of his face, particularly during moments when proposals approached his boundaries. This facial discipline significantly enhanced his negotiating outcomes. Fifth, listening expressions powerfully shape others' communication. How your face responds while others speak dramatically influences both what they share and how they perceive. Your receptivity and understanding. People who command respect demonstrate exceptional listening expressions. They maintain attentive eye contact without staring. They nod strategically to acknowledge key points rather than nodding continuously as a nervous habit. They allow appropriate reactions to register without exaggeration or suppression. These calibrated expressions create an environment where others feel both heard and respected. Practice this. During your next important conversation, bring conscious awareness to your facial expression while listening. Maintain eye contact, offer occasional appropriate nodding, and allow your natural reactions to show without amplification or suppression. This quality of attentive, controlled listening immediately enhances your perceived authority. Remember this, your face speaks a language. Make sure it's saying what you want it to say. When you develop the art of controlled expression, when your face communicates exactly what you intend to communicate, no more and no less, you create a presence that commands exceptional respect. The capacity for facial self-command distinguishes you as someone of unusual emotional intelligence and self-regulation. It creates an impression of congruence, integrity, and inner strength that words alone cannot convey. It allows you to communicate with precision across both verbal and nonverbal channels, creating an integrated message that carries extraordinary impact. In our next chapter, we'll explore another critical dimension of commanding respect without words, becoming an emotional anchor for others. Because in moments of uncertainty or chaos, the person who maintains composed stability naturally emerges as the leader, regardless of formal position. In chaos, people look for composure. If you can stay grounded, you become the emotional anchor everyone trusts. Consider this scenario. A crisis erupts in your organization. A major project has failed. A key client is threatening to leave. Financial projections are being revised downward. The atmosphere is charged with anxiety, blame, and reactivity. In this environment, notice where attention naturally flows. It doesn't move toward the loudest voice or the highest title. It gravitates toward the person who maintains composure, who embodies calm, clear thinking amid the emotional turbulence. This person becomes the emotional anchor that stabilizes the entire system. This capacity to maintain centered stability regardless of external circumstances is perhaps the most powerful way to command respect without words. It distinguishes you as someone of exceptional inner strength and natural leadership. It creates a presence that others instinctively trust and follow, especially in challenging times. I witnessed a perfect example of this during a corporate crisis where a data breach had exposed sensitive customer information. The executive team was in turmoil. The CEO was angrily demanding explanations. The CTO was defensively detailing technical failures. The legal counsel was anxiously outlining liability scenarios. Amid this emotional chaos, the chief operating officer, a woman not known for being particularly charismatic or verbally dominant, maintained remarkable composure. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't display anxiety. She didn't engage in blame or defensiveness. She simply remained steady, asking clarifying questions, focusing attention on next steps, maintaining perspective when others were catastrophizing. Without explicit direction, the meeting gradually reoriented around her. Her questions became the focal points for discussion. Her calm demeanor began to influence others' emotional states. Her practical focus shifted the conversation from blame to solution. She had become the emotional anchor that stabilized the group, not through formal authority, but through composed presence. This phenomenon, where emotional stability naturally commands attention and respect, reflects a fundamental human need for psychological safety amid uncertainty. When systems are under stress, people instinctively seek stabilizing forces. The person who maintains inner equilibrium regardless of external turbulence becomes that force, commanding respect without requiring words. But here's what most people don't understand. Becoming an emotional anchor isn't about suppressing your feelings or projecting false calm. It's about developing genuine emotional self-regulation, the capacity to experience your natural reactions without being controlled by them. It's about maintaining inner stability that allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Let's explore specific practices for developing this respect-commanding capacity. First, understand the neuroscience of emotional contagion. Research has demonstrated that emotions literally spread from person to person through an unconscious process of mirroring. When someone expresses anxiety, fear, or anger, these emotions activate matching neural patterns in observers' brains, creating a cascade effect that can destabilize entire groups. Conversely, when you maintain calm, centered presence amid emotional turbulence, your state creates a counterbalancing influence that can help regulate others' emotional responses. Your composed presence becomes a neurological template that others unconsciously adopt, creating a stabilizing effect on the entire system. This understanding transforms how you approach challenging situations. Your emotional self-regulation isn't just a personal discipline, it's a powerful leadership tool that directly shapes the psychological environment around you. Second, develop awareness of emotional triggers and habitual reactions. Most people are largely unconscious of their specific emotional vulnerabilities, the particular circumstances that reliably provoke their strongest reactions. This unconsciousness leaves them vulnerable to being emotionally hijacked precisely when stability is most needed. People who serve as emotional anchors have developed precise awareness of their personal triggers. They know exactly which situations, comments, or circumstances tend to provoke their strongest emotional responses. This awareness creates crucial space between stimulus and reaction, the interval where choice becomes possible. Practice this. Begin identifying your specific emotional triggers, the particular scenarios that reliably provoke your strongest reactions. Notice the physical sensations that accompany these responses. This awareness itself begins to create space between stimulus and reaction, allowing for more deliberate response. I worked with a brilliant leader whose effectiveness was periodically undermined by emotional reactivity when her competence was questioned. By developing awareness of this specific trigger and the physical sensations that accompanied it, tightening chest, quickened breathing, flushing face, she created an early warning system that allowed her to implement regulation strategies before becoming visibly reactive. Third, master physiological self-regulation techniques that create emotional stability. Your emotional state is inextricably linked to your physiological condition. By deliberately regulating your physiology, your breathing, muscle tension, posture, and movement, you can directly influence your emotional experience even in challenging circumstances. People who serve as emotional anchors have mastered specific physiological techniques that maintain their inner stability regardless of external conditions. These aren't complex practices. They're simple, immediately applicable approaches that can be implemented even in high-stress situations. Practice this. Develop what I call the stabilizing breath, a deliberate breathing pattern of inhaling for a count of 4, holding briefly, and exhaling for a count of 6. This extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, counterbalancing the sympathetic activation that accompanies stress responses. Implementing this breathing pattern amid challenging circumstances creates physiological conditions that support emotional stability. I coached a surgeon who struggled with maintaining composure during unexpected complications in the operating room. We developed a specific protocol. When complications arose, he would take 3 stabilizing breaths while mentally reciting, "I have handled this before," during the extended exhale. This simple practice dramatically improved his capacity to maintain the calm, clear thinking essential for complex medical decision-making under pressure. Fourth, cultivate what psychologists call affect tolerance, the capacity to experience uncomfortable emotions without being compelled to immediately alleviate them through action. Most people are driven to escape uncomfortable emotional states as quickly as possible, leading to impulsive behaviors that often exacerbate the very situations causing distress. People who serve as emotional anchors have developed remarkable tolerance for emotional discomfort. They can experience anxiety, frustration, or uncertainty without being driven to immediate relief-seeking behavior. This capacity allows them to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, maintaining stability precisely when it's most needed but hardest to achieve. Practice this. When experiencing uncomfortable emotions, bring conscious attention to the physical sensations without attempting to change or escape them. Notice where you feel the emotion in your body. Observe its qualities, its temperature, movement, intensity. This observational stance builds the capacity to experience discomfort without being controlled by it. Fifth, maintain perspective amid intensity by developing what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal, the ability to interpret challenging situations in ways that reduce their emotional impact. Most people automatically adopt worst-case interpretations during crises, amplifying their emotional reactions and limiting their cognitive flexibility. People who serve as emotional anchors habitually reframe situations to maintain balanced perspective. They don't deny difficulties or risks, but they consistently interpret events in ways that support thoughtful response rather than catastrophic reaction. This cognitive approach maintains the clear thinking essential for effective leadership amid challenges. Practice this. When facing challenging circumstances, deliberately generate multiple interpretations rather than accepting your initial perspective as definitive. Ask yourself, what else might this situation mean? What opportunities might exist alongside the obvious challenges? What would this look like from a longer-term perspective? This mental flexibility maintains cognitive clarity when others are limited by emotional reactions. Remember this, in moments of uncertainty or crisis, people naturally look for stability. The person who maintains calm, clear presence amid emotional turbulence becomes the gravitational center around which others orient. This capacity to stay grounded when circumstances are spinning commands profound respect without requiring words. When you develop the ability to maintain inner equilibrium regardless of external conditions, when you can experience your natural, emotional responses without being controlled by them, you create a presence that naturally stabilizes systems under stress. You become the emotional anchor that others instinctively trust and follow, not because of formal authority, but because of genuine inner strength. In our final chapter, we'll explore the ultimate expression of commanding respect without words, living as a silent example. Because the highest form of influence isn't what you say about your values, it's how consistently you embody them through your daily choices and actions. The highest form of influence is example. No declarations, no performance, just action throughout. This message, we've explored the specific elements of commanding presence, from first impressions to emotional anchoring, from strategic silence to controlled expression. These components, when integrated, create a presence that naturally elicits respect without requiring words. But in this final chapter, I want to address the foundation that underlies all these elements, living as a silent example of your values and principles. Consider the people who have earned your deepest respect over your lifetime. Beyond their specific skills or achievements, what quality most distinguished them? If you reflect honestly, you'll likely recognize this. They lived in alignment with their stated principles, their daily actions, both observed and unobserved, consistently. reflected their professed values. This congruence between declaration and demonstration, between word and deed, commands a quality of respect that transcends all other forms of influence. It creates a presence that speaks more eloquently than any verbal persuasion ever could. I remember interviewing a renowned organizational leader about the source of his extraordinary influence. Despite leading a global enterprise with thousands of employees, he spoke softly, dressed modestly, and occupied minimal space in conversations. Yet his impact was undeniable. His brief comments received immediate attention. His suggestions were eagerly implemented. His presence commanded unusual deference. When I asked what he considered the foundation of his influence, he said something profound. "I've never asked anyone to do anything I haven't already done myself. I've never espoused a value I haven't personally paid a price to uphold. People don't respect what you claim. They respect what you consistently demonstrate when it costs you something." This insight captures the essence of commanding respect through silent example. It's not about performance or declaration. It's about consistent demonstration, particularly when adherence to principles requires personal sacrifice or goes against immediate self-interest. But here's what most people don't understand. Living as a silent example isn't about moral perfection or flawless consistency. It's about the general alignment between your stated values and your observable choices. It's about the pattern of your behavior rather than any individual action. Let's explore the specific qualities that allow you to command respect through silent example. First, value clarity provides the essential foundation. Most people operate from vague, unexamined values that shift based on circumstance or social pressure. This ambiguity creates inconsistency between declaration and action that undermines credibility and respect. People who command deep respect have developed extraordinary clarity about their core values. They've moved beyond generic principles like integrity or excellence to specific, personally meaningful definitions that guide concrete decisions. This clarity enables consistent action aligned with stated principles, even in challenging circumstances. Practice this. Identify your 3 to 5 core values and define them with specific behavioral descriptions. What exactly does integrity mean in your daily choices? What specific behaviors constitute excellence in your context? This clarity transforms abstract concepts into practical guides for aligned action. I worked with a business leader who claimed to value work-life balance, but consistently worked and expected others to work 70-hour weeks. This misalignment between stated values and demonstrated behavior severely undermined his credibility despite his technical expertise. We focused first on clarifying what work-life balance actually meant to him in behavioral terms. This process revealed that his true value was periodic intensive focus, balanced by genuine disconnection, a rhythm of intense work followed by complete disengagement. By aligning his language with his actual values and ensuring his behavior consistently demonstrated this principle, he rebuilt credibility that enhanced his overall leadership effectiveness. Second, choice consistency, alignment between stated principles and actual decisions, especially when costly or difficult, forms the heart of commanding respect through silent example. Most people espouse values they haven't personally paid a price to uphold. They advocate principles until adherence requires significant sacrifice or goes against immediate self-interest. People who command deep respect demonstrate remarkable consistency between their stated values and their observable choices, particularly when alignment comes at personal cost. This congruence between declaration and demonstration, especially when difficult, creates an impression of exceptional integrity that naturally commands respect. I remember consulting for an organization where a senior leader had publicly committed to a major initiative that subsequently proved problematic. Despite significant pressure to distance himself from the struggling project, He consistently accepted personal responsibility while working to address the issues. This alignment between his stated commitment to accountability and his demonstrated behavior, even when costly to his reputation, earned extraordinary respect that enhanced his influence far beyond the specific situation. Third, private-public. Alignment, consistency between observed and unobserved behavior, powerfully shapes perceptions of authenticity and trustworthiness. Most people maintain different standards for public and private conduct, creating an underlying dishonesty that others sense even if they can't articulate it. People who command deep respect maintain remarkable consistency between their public and private behavior. Their adherence to principles doesn't depend on observation or potential consequences. They demonstrate their values even in circumstances where violations would likely remain undetected, creating a foundation of genuine integrity that naturally elicits respect. This alignment isn't about performance or impression management. It's about developing such clarity about your values and such commitment to living them that your behavior remains consistent regardless of context or observation. Fourth, evolutionary consistency. Maintaining core principles while adapting to new information and changing circumstances demonstrates the thoughtful flexibility that distinguishes wisdom from rigid ideology. Most people either abandon principles when challenged or cling to outdated applications of values despite changing contexts, both of which undermine respect. People who command deep respect demonstrate remarkable consistency regarding core principles, while thoughtfully evolving their application based on new information and changing circumstances. This combination of principled foundation and thoughtful adaptation creates an impression of wisdom that naturally commands respect across diverse contexts. I coached a judge renowned for his exceptional respect across the ideological spectrum despite addressing deeply divisive issues. His approach combined unwavering commitment to core principles of fairness and equal treatment with thoughtful evolution in their application based on emerging social understanding. This balanced approach, neither abandoning principles nor rigidly adhering to outdated applications, earned respect from those who disagreed with specific rulings, but recognized the integrity of his decision-making process. Fifth, and perhaps most powerfully, is what I call value prioritization in conflict, how you respond when your stated values come into tension with each other. Most people haven't clarified their value hierarchy, leading to inconsistent decisions when principles conflict. This inconsistency creates an impression of situational ethics that undermines respect. People who command deep respect have developed clear understanding of their value hierarchy, which principles take precedence when tensions arise. This clarity enables consistent decision-making even in complex situations where values conflict, creating an impression of principled thoughtfulness that naturally commands respect. I remember working with a healthcare leader facing an extraordinarily difficult decision about resource allocation during a crisis. The situation created tension between values of individual care, community welfare, and institutional sustainability. His clear value hierarchy, which placed human well-being above institutional concerns while balancing individual and community needs, enabled consistent, principled decision-making even amid overwhelming complexity. The respect commanded by his approach wasn't about agreement with specific decisions. It stemmed from recognition of the consistent principles underlying those decisions, even in circumstances where no perfect solution existed. Remember this: the most profound respect isn't earned through what you say about your values, but through how consistently you demonstrate them, especially when alignment comes at personal cost. Your daily choices, the small, often unobserved decisions that reveal your true priorities, speak more eloquently about your character than any words you could possibly speak. When you develop clarity about your core values, consistency between stated principles and observable choices, alignment between public and private behavior, balanced evolution and application while maintaining core principles, and clear hierarchy for resolving value conflicts, you create a presence that commands extraordinary respect without requiring words. This approach, living as a silent example of your values, creates a foundation of genuine integrity that enhances every other element of commanding presence we've explored. It transforms techniques and practices into authentic expressions of character rather than manipulative tools for impression management. As we conclude this exploration of commanding respect without words, remember this fundamental truth: genuine. Respect isn't demanded or manipulated. It's earned through consistent demonstration of qualities worthy of respect. When your presence, behavior, and choices align with principles of genuine value, respect naturally follows, not because you've demanded it, but because you've deserved it. You already have what it takes. Now, go prove it, not through words, but through the silent example of a life lived in alignment with your highest values. That's the ultimate source of respect that cannot be demanded, only earned, and never withdrawn once genuinely established. If this message spoke to you, subscribe for more powerful mindset content. Let us know in the comments what part hit you the hardest. You already have what it takes. Now go prove it.